For anybody skeptical about a lot of these regenerative practices, it's well-founded because a lot of them do not pay off right away. A lot of them are hard to see, but there's some that came like instantaneously. The first time I could have cows out in nothing more than a t-shirt, it was a game changer for me. Even though it's a little scary to jump into that stuff, it gets fun to just be able to play with it and see, wow, look what they did this time, or why didn't they do as good this time? And it's not the end of the world if you get it wrong one day or 2 days, you know? The biggest hurdle for a lot of guys is the financial part. My name is Jim Willis. I've been the manager here at the Four Diamond Ranch for just over 10 years. Came here mostly because of some of the changes that the owners wanted to implement. A lot of it has to do with lower inputs, a lot of what they call regenerative grazing practices now. We currently run about 650 mother cows, and we retain all their offspring to either go into our bred heifer program or into our grass finishing program. The Four Diamond was put together from 3 ranches by the current owners somewhere around 2013, 2014. I came here in early 2015 to take over the management, so I was brought in to implement a lot of those. Some of the other things we've done is started selecting for a herd that can do well under our management conditions in the Shields Valley. And we do that a couple ways. One, by limiting the breeding season on heifers. And more recently, we've started raising our own bulls from cows that we feel are well adapted here. And then with those bulls, we'll be able to accelerate the change in our herd. I like the idea of the reduced labor and the reduced effort. It does come with some costs that you aren't going to wean as big a calf. But if you reduce your costs at a higher rate than you reduce your revenue, your money ahead. The owners, they have a belief in some of these regenerative systems. They wanted to see it implemented on the property that they controlled. It's important to them both from a social standpoint, but also an economic standpoint, in that they wanted the ag operation on this property to be viable, to be revenue producing, so it's both not only ecologically sustainable but financially sustainable. I was born and raised in Colorado, a multi-generational family down there. My folks decided somewhat later in their life that they wanted to start a dairy, and it started with actually a dairy plant. We used to bottle and process raw milk from dairies and then do home delivery and all that fun stuff. It was quite an upbringing. About 4 years into that, my folks decided to work with my mom's brother and her father and actually start a dairy itself. Those in the audience that aren't familiar with a dairy, it's a 24/7, 365. And then you throw on the fact that 5 days a week you got to haul milk all over. This was just outside of the Denver metropolitan area in Golden, Colorado. As I graduated high school, went to college, originally I had no intention of getting back into agriculture, but one summer I was home and we leased hayfields down the San Luis Valley to provide feed for our dairy. And I was cutting on a swather, and it just came to me that I did not want to be in an office the rest of my life. And literally this was like days before I was supposed to go back to school. And so I couldn't switch all my classes that semester, but the next semester I went full bore into agriculture. I ended up transferring to CSU and getting a degree in farm and ranch management. About the time I graduated, I had to look for something else to do, and I ended up becoming the assistant herdsman at a dairy north of Fort Collins. While I was there, unfortunately, suddenly lost his dad, and so he picked me to go help with the cow-calf stuff, and I ended up liking the seasonality of it compared to dairy farming, and so he kept me on there, and I started managing this cow-calf operation, and he wanted to expand the feeding operation, so we started bringing in a lot of yearlings, running yearlings. Had a small feedlot there. We're feeding out a few hundred a year, and I was managing all that. Really enjoyed it. About that time, my soon-to-be wife and I decided to move to Montana. I was ready for a change as it was, and I thought Montana would be a good place to restart. And we moved up here. And since we've been here, we've been able to live in a lot of great communities across the state. My first real ranching job up here was with the state prison ranch in Deer Lodge. I spent 7 years there, first as a ranch supervisor, and then as the farm boss, overseeing about 3,000 acres of farm ground and all the related irrigation and harvesting, and mostly hay and some small grain. When I crossed paths with the current owner of the Four Diamond, and a lot of their goals and stuff were things I was eager and willing to try, and so the rest is history. Been here ever since. Some of our biggest challenges here were in implementing this. I'd probably start with the weather. The winters here were more significant and deeper than I anticipated when I first came here. So that's been a challenge on the lower input side. So, because one of the biggest inputs you have in a cow-calf operation is your feed costs. And so that's been one of the big challenges, is the winters. Some of the other things is doing things out of sync with your neighbors. It could be a challenge, breeding our cattle when we want them because their bulls are already out and we haven't turned our bulls out. That's been a big challenge. Ended up with calves from our cows that are out of sync with what our program is. Being able to step back and say, all right, we got to play it out and see if it's going to work. Just because it looks a little tough and like we made the wrong decision, you don't want to be switching horses midstream every time you have a setback. So there's been that calculation of, okay, things aren't quite right, but give it time. I'll see if we can get them to move. Come, boss! Come, boss! Moving them every day is they get really trained and accustomed to you, and they know when you show up that they're about to get fresh feed. We'll see if we get some motion on them. But anyway, these are our heifers, and they're currently getting bred to Wagyu bulls out here. So all their calves will be a terminal cross, meaning none of the heifers out of these girls will be kept as breeding stock. So one of my goals when I started here was to build a beef herd that could live in this environment with under our management conditions. And part of that is, a lot of these guys talk about it. Burke Tykert was big on it. And then a lot of what I've read from this Johann Zeitzman about driving fertility in your herd. And a couple ways you can do that. One is you keep a short breeding season for your heifers, and only the most productive or the most fertile heifers are going to get bred up. And so we had been doing that before we started with the Wagyus, but now that we're looking at going direct to consumer, we've expanded that breeding season. We started breeding our own bulls to put back on our own cows. And but fertility is the big driver. That's what we push most of our selection pressure on. It has a couple impacts. One is fertility is mostly driven by body condition. So cows that are easy keeping can put on fat easy, and under these conditions are going to be your most fertile. Well, those also coincide with what makes a good grass finisher, is that they can put on fat easy under, on lower quality feed, just forage based. From here you can kind of see it. We got the creek right there, and we're moving them in small chunks away from the creek. And so they'll be coming through this electric that Robert just opened. And then this is what we call a trunk line. It runs clear across the pasture. It's the hot fence that you link all the other ones to make it hot. And so they're going to come across that cross fence. They'll be able to go up here a few hundred feet, about a few hundred feet that way. We're giving them maybe 2 acres a day. And we measure that in what we call it as stock days per acre. And so whenever Robert or whoever's out here trying to decide how big you make it, you got to train your eye to see how much forage you think is here. And so we're probably 40 to 50 SDAs. And when you convert that, because a heifer this size is not a full SDA, we figured at about 0.6 to 0.7 per head, and there's 260 out there. That's another reason I want more water out here. When they have to go a long ways away, is they end up just hanging out down by the water all the time, and don't want to go back up. So as you get further and further away, you get a lot less utilization on your grass, and then you get too much impact down at the creek. And so you can see there's still quite a bit of forage standing and stuff. And before I started that practice of locking them in, this stuff would be grazed down hard, and we'd have forage up there that wasn't utilized. On our breeding, I don't sort these heifers at all. This is every heifer that was born here last year. Okay. Is just turned out here with the bulls. And so we let Mother Nature do the selecting for us. And
what does that mean when you say you let Mother Nature do the selecting?
Use our own personal judgment or bias to decide which heifers are best.
Okay.
We run these heifers under our management scenario, which is a low input grazing based system, and then they get turned out here with the bulls, and if they come inbred, they're a good heifer. If they don't come inbred, they're not a good heifer.
And what's your shot program on that? Are you giving them a second shot, a second go around, or are you one and done and you're out?
On the heifers, it's one and done. Every heifer that comes in open this fall will just go into our grass finish program.
Okay. What are your genetics? Because I know you're talking about some of the Wagyu experimentation that y'all been doing on the carcass data, but your females, I mean, are they mainly Angus? I see some red in here, so is there a cross?
They're an Angus based. Since I've been here until very recently, we've used Angus bulls, but there's a bull breeder down in Sheridan, Montana, and he's actually a red Angus, but he has black-hided ones that he keeps. And so but I like the way he was managing his bulls, because he wasn't growing them out on anything. The bulls had to develop on forage, grazing, and so those bulls were red carriers. And of course, I'm sure some of these crossbred cows that I've had red in them, so we're starting to see more reds in our herd, which I don't worry too much about hide color, since we're going grass finished. We're paid once they're on the rail. There's no hide on them to decide whether they're good or not.
They look good though. When were these calved out?
We calve in May. May 7th's our due date, according to our bull turnout. And so we calve out on the range. The cows are just turned out. The main herd, the mature cows, we check them maybe once or twice a week. And then our like these girls come next May, we'll try and go through them once a day, but they'll be out on their own. That's part of our selection process, is they've got to be able to calve on their own, get their calf up on their own, and do what God intended, which is to have calves and eat grass. So
man, I gotta say, I appreciate that perspective. It's easy to get emotionally attached to whether it's a breeding program that you want to work because it's your idea and you're trying something different and you're just itching for that success, or especially when it's your own operation too, right? You have to have some kind of guideline of production, because as soon as you start making excuses because you bought a bull and you thought he was going to work out and he didn't, or it's, you know, a cow that's been really good year after year, and you know, as soon as you start lowering that standard is when the entire herd starts to go off that cliff. So I appreciate that one and done.
yeah, we have simple selection criteria, but we stick to it. One advantage where we're not calving like a lot of guys do through the barn and everything, when you're that close to them all the time and calving, I know from experience you get connected to some of the cows.
Sure.
And it's tough to draw that hard line, where we don't do a lot of selecting. You know, we don't know that, oh, that girl's the daughter of this one of my favorite cows, so she's got to stay. You know, we don't have any of that kind of biases into it, and so it really is just selecting for what works in our management system.
Those are your Wagyu bulls right there?
Yep. How you graze and everything, you know, it ups the productivity of your land, which means you have more cattle, which means you have more income. But there are a lot of other benefits, and a lot of people, especially the ones that insist on regenerative or sustainable, they're more worried about that, what I would say is a side effect of trying to up the production on your ranch, and that soil health and all that, which is good. And you can't, if you're not improving the health of your soil, you're not going to improve the overall productivity of your ranch, and you won't be able to do any of this. But like, which drives which? The soil, just saying you have healthy soils doesn't pay you any money, and without economic viability and economic sustainability, everything else is moot. There's no reason to do any of this. And I don't, you know, a lot of people say, well, that's greedy. Well, are you going to spend all the capital you have to do something that never pays you back? And we're talking about huge landscapes and lots of capital. So at some point, it has to be economically sustainable. That it can be an ongoing concern at a profit level that makes people want to continue to have their capital sunk into something like this. And I just think a lot of that other regenerative stuff, it just, I don't think it should be the sole function. You know, I shouldn't lose money just to increase the soil health, however you want to measure it, by 5-10% more than what I'm doing making money. Part of what drives me professionally is, and that I get the opportunity to do here, is doing some of this new stuff, seeing what works and what can work, and hopefully being an example for the wider ranching community. Because really what matters to me is keeping agriculture and ranchers on the landscape, because that keeps our small rural communities viable. And I really believe that's where a lot of the values that have made this country what it is are still found. Even if I'm an example of how not to do it, I'm fine with that, as long as I am helping keep people on the landscape and keep our rural communities viable. We bought hay late in the winter, and we're getting it delivered in here, and my cows were out here in these pastures, and we couldn't get the sit because we were putting the hay in the that trap right there. We couldn't get the semi all the way in, so my guy was just setting them on the ground so the trucker could get out of here and then hauling them in there with the tractor. And well, we had fed the cows clear across the pasture, and they got bored of that and came over here and just tore apart 2 of the bales that were sitting here. And this is what we got.
Of it, huh?
Yeah, this stuff is Bezoyski's Russian wild rye. That's this tall stuff. And so you see how it kind of bushy, and one of its advantages is that it keeps the weeds down between these rows because of its root structure.
It goes out?
Yeah. And you plant them on pretty wide spacing that you can see there. Well, I like a lot of the advantages of this rye. This bare ground is what I don't like. So if you try and drive across it, it's like driving across corrugated tin.
Really?
Yeah. Because all the grass bunches up as long as it doesn't get too deep or too crusted over, and this is the best part of the ranch as far as snow cover. If you get into the elevation on either side of it, it gets way deeper. And then if you get the wind, it drifts and crusts. Cows will still work for it, but they end up burning more calories than they get once they get down to it. Sure. And so we end up having to feed supplementally. I would say out of the 5 winters I've been here, 10 winters, 5 of them we had to put them on full feed for 2 to 3 months just because there was no way to get through the snow. So what I'm going to do with our bale grazing is I went to, because I know we're going to be grazing our pivots more. I don't want to just do the alfalfa meadow brome like most people do for hay up here. And so I have a 7 species blend that I was recommended. And this summer, the 2 pivots I planted to that, on the first cutting, I left one of them to just stand and go to seed. And so actually right now they're cutting that for the second cutting, and we're going to cut all that stuff that went to seed and use it for this bale grazing experiment and hopefully see what of the species in there actually take hold here and what'll work. And see, the cool thing about it is even where there isn't stuff growing, it's not bare ground.
Exactly.
It's still the manure and leftover hay from when they bale grazed it. And so you're keeping the soil temperature cooler with that, increasing its water holding capacity, eventually increasing the carbon in the soil. But 2 bales did this little area here. Over 3,500 acres, it take me a while.
Yeah, a little bit.
Especially when your goal is to feed as little hay as possible to your cows. And so you can come right out of it and the edge of that bale was somewhere right in there. These pivots here were hayed perpetually before I took over management, and there was a thistle problem in it, and I was trying to hay the thistle out for a few years, but then as we got into the grass finishing, I needed to graze it, just to have enough acres for the grass finishers. And so I've been trying to graze the thistle out. I haven't seen a lot of results in reducing the amount.
Sure.
But there was one old boy, and I wish I could attribute who it is, but he said, "Is it really a weed if your cows will eat it?" And so as you can see, using those one-day high-density grazes, those steers will strip the stalks almost completely.
Absolutely. They leave a little tuft at the top. That seems to be it.
Yeah, and the tough part about trying to graze weeds out is giving your grass that's along with it enough rest. Mm-hmm. We're gonna try it on the fail fast and fail cheap thing. Just try some of the more infested spots with a small group of cattle, real high density, with these more tender and rosettes from the thistle, and see if we can get them real late in the fall here. My idea is that if we graze them off real late in the fall, they'll still try and grow, pulling more nutrients out of the roots, and then hit winter without being able to resupply those roots.
Gotcha.
But I also don't want to impact my grass so bad that the thistles can then start taking that over. It's one of the fun things, but also one of the tough things. It's hard not to just come in here with some chemical and
take it all out.
Yeah, but even with that, I'd be in here years to reduce it, significantly. And I don't think, well, I don't know. You may be able to spray enough chemical in here that you can eradicate the thistle, but I don't think you ever would.
Yeah, radiation. No. So how long ago were you trying to graze out the thistle? How long ago did you start that project?
This year? Or
just in general, when you decided to...
This is about our third year grazing it like this, trying to work on that. And trying to rotate when we're using it. The last 2 years I've been in here when these thistles are pretty tall and stocky. And this year it wasn't, I didn't mean to be, it's just the way things turned out that they were tall when we got here and with the cattle. So next year my plan is to come in a lot earlier and try and graze them out. Some advice that I'd give myself as a young guy coming up in this industry, and one of them's cliche: never stop learning. I mean, every opportunity you have, don't go to a place thinking you're just going to cowboy and pass up opportunities to learn to run machinery or learn cropping systems. Don't ever give up those opportunities. It has paid off in spades for me. I am well versed in so many different aspects of agriculture that I'm not worried if I need to go someplace else. I can fit in, and especially with the added benefit of growing up on a dairy. It's one that you don't see a whole lot, especially out west here, and especially in beef industry guys. There isn't a lot of crossover there, but yeah, just take every opportunity you can. For anybody skeptical about a lot of these regenerative practices, it's well founded, because a lot of them do not pay off right away, and a lot of them are hard to see. But there's some that, for me, came like instantaneously. The first time I could calve cows out in nothing more than a t-shirt was a game changer for me. When you learn more about it and you actually start doing it, it's kind of fun. Where we're grazing high intensity with our yearlings, it gets fun to just be able to play with it and see, wow, look what they did this time, or why didn't they do as good this time, and so you're always solving these little problems, but you also, it's not the end of the world if you get it wrong one day or 2 days, just as long as you're always observing and everything. The biggest hurdle for a lot of guys is the financial part, and it's hard to transition when you're getting that paycheck. And that happens a lot with a lot of these regenerative practices. Calving later, everyone that ends up calving later finds out that it makes more financial sense to run yearlings, where these guys are just used to calving and weaning calves and putting them on a truck. And so it takes some more management and some more forethought, so it's not easy. And there's a transition that can be a little tough financially. If you're willing to just even bite off a small chunk and see how it goes, just as long as you do it fast and cheap and you learn something from it, it's worth it.
And there you have it, another example that you can positively impact the environment while still maintaining profitability. We want to thank Jim with the 4 Diamond Ranch for hosting this episode of Ranchworthy, brought to you by the Texas A&M Center of Grazing Lands and Ranch Management. I'm your host, Emma Kaufman, and until then, we'll see you next time.